happy holidays, Paul.
Happy holidays, Greg.
The basement boys are back.
That's all right. We're
um,
upstairs now.
you're upstairs. I am in the basement. Yeah, I'm still in the basement. So you're
uh,
you're moving up, and I'm staying. I'm spinning my wheels. I'm staying put. But yeah, so one thing we wanted to talk about was what makes a great engineer, and when we're hiring at Skellig, what kind of people are we looking to work with? And so just before I guess we got into this conversation, we were just talking on the side about is it ever frustrating to be pushing to get some scope of work done only to be delayed because the right people weren't in the room to either approve your scope of work or approve that document you were just working on. And
yep.
yeah, it is, and that does happen, like, from time to time. That's why I think when I'm working on projects, I'm not always going to be, I know I'm not going to be the best technical engineer in the room. And there's going to be some part of the project that I've never done before and I will have to figure out on the fly. But to compensate for that, I always try to be, the best teammate I can be, and be there for other people when they need help with a scope of work, or they need an approver for their protocol or document, or a
Yep.
reviewer for some code that they've developed. And I think when I'm interviewing other engineers and looking for people to come into Skellig, I'm not always looking for who worked on the biggest capital project on their resume, or who knows the
Yep.
most stuff and who has the most certifications. I'm looking for good teammates. I'm looking for the best teammates, and
Yep.
um, someone that I know will be the first to arrive and the last to leave, and not on a daily basis, but when it's required on a project, who is going to be there and who's going to have your back. And the more people like that we get in Skellig, the better teams we can build and the better support we can have for each other. And then ultimately that leads to success on a project. So
Yeah. Isn't it funny though? Oftentimes it ends up being like, I know what you're saying, like, oh, who's the first to arrive and the last to leave? But I think I would say I don't care about that as much. It's more who's taking responsibility for it, so that, if you're trying to coordinate a bunch of things, if you have someone that you can trust to either tell you, hey, there's a big problem with my stuff, or I got this, it's going to be fine. That's really, that's so useful to have in a teammate. So like that collaboration is probably 60% of the actual getting the thing done, whatever it may be. Because often the time it's those last minute surprises that come up because someone actually hadn't it figured out. They actually didn't know how they were going to solve the problem, or they thought you'd just figure it out in the moment. So it was poor planning. Um, and I think that kind of comes down to caring, which is kind of, I think you're talking about as well. Um, and when you find someone,
yeah,
when they start talking about the job and you can see the passion kind of for the work falling out of them, like, okay, that's interesting. You met someone. If they can communicate well, then you've got, that's the, you could end the call right there, basically.
oh right,
Because,
right.
if you've got
Well, I
someone that
think,
can communicate, that's passionate about the job, then you're pretty much made.
yeah, no, a great teammate I think is always a great communicator. Like, that goes hand in hand.
Mm,
um my wife and I, we actually play, some like cooperative video games together every now and then, and there's some of them that involve like a lot of communication, and we're a great team, her and I together, and we're great communicators. And um
that's
uh
awesome.
well, one of the games we play is or that we got really into is Overcooked, which was like a cooking game, like running a kitchen.
Oh
And like,
wow.
someone's got to chop the onions, and then like someone's got to like cook the, cook the meat, or like get uh buns on plates is something we
Yeah.
would always say. And it just takes an enormous amount of communication, but without communication, like you just lose, like in that game. Well, to go back to what you were saying, like, are you a good communicator in that you care and you like take pride in your own work? um I think in those moments, yeah, where you're working late and you're the only one at a job site, um finishing up whatever you had to do, there's two feelings when it comes to that. One is kind of what you said, how come I'm the only one here? You can take either your mindset in that direction and get frustrated, or you can take your mindset in another direction and realize that maybe you don't have the best like work life balance, and that might be your own fault, right? And that's not necessarily a lack of caring, but more so like having the maturity um and intelligence to say like, yeah, this can wait for tomorrow. Life will go on. This like, we might have to shift the deadline a little bit.
But that's communication again, because that's where working as part of a team, you kind of understand the bigger goal, your part to play. Does it have to be done Friday at 5, or could it be done
Mhm.
Monday by 2 and achieve the same outcome? You know, also why did it have, why did it get to a pressure cooker situation in the first place? Probably because there might have been some level of planning or there was no planning. I've seen, especially now being more in management, I see more of the problems, right? So you see more of like where people run into to difficulty, and then it's really heartbreaking to see like a great project manager or a great engineer, and they're in a situation where um, they don't have the full picture, they don't have the full story, and you're trying to figure out how to support them through it, and sometimes you can't fix it in the immediate, so it feels kind of, you feel kind of useless, right? But um, the thing to take away from that is, how did they end up in that situation in the first place, and what can you do to kind of bend that arc over time so that they're not in that situation. So either it's something like, you're okay, the next effort or the next part of the project, there's more help or there's a more honest conversation. Usually all progress starts with the truth, and often a time, I think the underpinning thing of this whole conversation is communication, and not being able to tell the truth, it, is a huge problem in engineering. And I don't mean it in
Mm.
big ways like, oh, there's a safety concern. I just mean it in small, little ways. I don't know if I can get that done. I haven't looked at the work. I haven't opened that document, so I don't actually know yet. Um, I haven't been assigned the work. I'm missing information. Um, who cares about this? Who needs to review this? Um, and that's easier said than done, right? Because that's a perfect kind of scenario. But there's those are the moments where great engineers have to be great communicators, because otherwise you just don't make progress. And typically that's something that you gain over time, right? You see enough of this stuff where okay, I know how this is going to go wrong. Let me bring this up now. And then the engineers that never progress beyond average are the ones that they don't speak up. They know what might
Mm.
happen and they don't try, because they're like, whatever. And then that's a lack of accountability. And you kind of want to understand who those people are, because they're not, because sometimes with younger engineers, they have it more, right? They're less, and then it kind of gets worked out of you over time, because you can, this is just everything is just the way it is. Nobody actually is trying to solve anything. and or solve some of these basic communication components of a project. Um, and sometimes it's true, but
I mean, that's an interesting point you brought up with someone early in their career oftentimes has a lot more, passion and energy and enthusiasm when they are communicating with their peers and their teammates, um versus someone, yeah, maybe that's been in the industry for 20 years and they kind of see a problem that's developing but choose maybe not to highlight it
well, they,
with the
yeah,
same
they
like
settle into the
rigor.
median, yeah, the median of how things go. It's always going to go like this. It's whereas that
Yeah.
young curiosity, but this is not the perfect way to ask the question, but like one of the things I'd be curious about is your impression of college and how it prepares you for the work,
Oh,
you
wow.
know, like, and
Yeah.
I know that's kind of a separate topic, so let's not go too deep into it. But like one of the things I find is interesting is like you come out of college, and you have no idea, I think, how important communication is in the whole grand scheme of achieving something. Nobody achieves anything on their own. Whereas when you're in college, it's
Yeah.
your score, it's your project, you're trying to do something. Sometimes they try to team you up, but it's never really a team. You're still getting your
Those were
own
the
individual
worst.
score. Yeah, those are
The
the
group
worst.
projects.
You get stuck with the work then.
Yeah, you're the one either doing the work or like, um yeah, group project. And then there was always the part at the end of the group project where you had to like give like peer reviews,
Oh
and
yeah,
actually that's very applicable to that probably prepared you the most for, um I guess, a vocation, right? um but yeah, no one liked group projects in college, especially like,
yeah,
that was your professor would say, okay, everyone, like, pick your team. Like, sometimes you were allowed to pick your team, sometimes you were assigned to a team. um, if you were able to pick your team, sometimes you would pick your friends, right? But that wasn't necessarily the best team. And yeah, man, interesting dynamics with that. But um, I guess in terms of schools, and yeah, do they prepare you for industry? Before I thought of that group project example, I was going to say no, but maybe there are some parallels and things that prepare you, but it certainly isn't the focus at the time.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, but
Um,
you're also coming from high school, living with your parents. You're in college. It's your first time living alone. So there's a lot of autonomy and learning that kind of goes on.
yeah, without diving too deep into it, like you said, it's its own topic. But
Yeah,
I would be a
yeah,
huge, I would have an interest in going to more of like a vocational school rather than like an academic school, if I got to live, you know,
same here. Hmm.
if I got to live again and do things over and over again, I would like to see how a vocational school would have played out and maybe even changed my career, right? And I've said this before, but I had no plans of becoming an automation engineer. Like, it wasn't something I ever thought of. It wasn't a
Yeah,
career that I even knew existed when I was in school, really. But then coming out of college, you need money, and I found a job, and that's been my career ever since. And obviously, there's parts of it that I really enjoy, which is why I've stayed, in this industry. But had I maybe got exposure to other careers like through a vocational school, maybe my life would be completely different. I don't know.
what yeah, whatever keeps you interested in something, especially with engineering, where it gets repetitive, you stay on the same
Mm-hmm.
you're on the same project too long, or you're You were designing something, now you're babysitting something. Um, you need both, right? And it's just kind of being self-aware. So like what I mean by that is like, so designing something up front is kind of cool, right? Oh, it's new, right? Oh, awesome. First time single use mixer or something like that, right? But then if you just move on to the next project, but you don't actually live with kind of what you created and see it like often the time, like it would definitely bother me where you'd see code created, especially as an automation engineer of process automation, where like the thing goes to hold and it's like, okay, well, some coder freaking did this and they built some really convenient library code that didn't really meet the mark for the user. And the users just say, oh, it's in hold. Okay, why is it in hold? It doesn't tell you what valve failed, what device,
Mm,
what problem. It doesn't give you the operator message. You have to call support. That's poor. But because sometimes when you see like that a operator has graduated up to become an engineer, then like the level of empathy for the end user is often so much higher. But I think engineers that are out of school starting with design, they can get there too. They just need to live with their mistakes a little bit more, because when you design something and then it goes into production and then you start to see, oh god, when I designed it I never thought it'd be used this way, or I never imagined that this commenting the code would be so important, or oh, I thought I was being clever, but by going off the books and off the reservation with how I did it, no one can understand how it's supposed to work or whatever. And you kind of learn so much. And I think the trick is to not get stuck in any one place, is to just kind of try to have a design experience, then have a site support experience, and kind of go back and forth and kind of build over time. But I think
mm.
if you kind of see the same thing over, if you start seeing the same thing over and over again, but you're learning, because sometimes you can follow your curiosity beyond automation, right? And I know we're just talking about automation engineers because that's what we do, but like it can be pretty cool to learn about that bioreactor, that biokill unit, that CIP system, and like you start to learn the process and why spray balls are important or whatever you're interested in. And it can be really fun. So as long as it's fun and you're enjoying it, that probably means you're on the right track. But if it's starting to get exhausting and you're bored, you probably need to switch it up a bit. And especially,
Mm.
obviously, it's Christmas or about to be. So anyone watching this, like if you're thinking like, I'm kind of bored, then you should probably think about like trying to see what other projects are out there, what other opportunities, um, and keeping it coherent about like what are the things you want to learn and where are you highly likely to get that experience.
What is the value of experience really, and then having a diverse experience?
Experience gives
Um,
you the ability to have vision, and you can either use that to improve things, or you can just, if you don't, it's kind of, that's the pity about experienced people that often don't speak up often enough to move the needle on something, especially on an engineering project where you've got younger engineers who are trying to learn or grow. Um, how do you structure a system that works for everybody? You can't have some older engineer with a lot of experience and like 10 juniors around them. And God, how do they have a chance to have a successful day when they're just trying to train juniors on the fly? Nobody's winning there. Um, but, you know, being honest about what situation and what you'll tolerate is a very healthy thing. What's going to be in service of the best outcomes? And I'm not talking about not struggling with a problem, because sometimes you don't see the bigger picture. You just got to struggle your way through it. And over time, you have patience with the process and it evolves. But um, I think a big part of communication is just understanding how to elevate problems so they can be resolved. And I think that's something that experienced engineers can do, and that's what makes the difference between an experienced average engineer and a great engineer. like everyone has a boss technically, right? Okay, I'm supposed to be CEO, but like who do I report to? Well, if all the engineers leave, I don't have a job anymore. If the clients don't want
Mm-hmm.
to work with this company anymore, I don't have a job. So nobody doesn't like everything gets done by collaboration. And but when you're in a company, but you're in a management level where either the structure isn't mature enough to support you, or you're not able to solve a problem for somebody reporting to you, um, that's a very hard place to be. Um, so I'd like to ask you, how long have you been, you used to be an engineer with Skellig, now you're
Yeah.
an engineering manager. What's that experience like in a real sense? Because I know it can't be easy. It's never going, not that it's never going to be easy, but um, yeah, I think it's got to be quite a challenge because you've got people like me who's trying to make directional decisions on strategy for the company. Maybe I'm trying to
Yeah.
get out of some of that tactical stuff too. So then I'm half in, half out. You're trying to take over. There's gaps. We're trying to understand, how to support engineers. Um, but
Yeah.
if I'm
There.
learning a new job trying to support you guys, then you're learning a new job how to support engineers. Just curious how you feel like what's that experience like? Because it's got to be the hardest job in any company, I imagine.
Well, this has been, I think, a huge learning experience for myself from um, self reflection on like what what this job entails to be successful. Because it is unlike being an engineer where there were a lot of um, I guess milestones that you could attribute to like what I'll call like a win, completing a project or
Mm-hmm.
not knowing how to get a device to communicate with Delta
Uh,
V, or another
mm-hmm.
control system, and you would solve that problem, and then that was it. Like that was the win. Um, but with middle management, um, the wins are less defined. You could make a decision to help someone, um, with either their career, or maybe it's being able to place someone on a job, but you might not see the fruits of those efforts until later, until you know if the engineer is actually happy in that role, and successful in that role, and if it was like a good life change for them. And so there is this mentality of like you have to make decisions with certain things, but you don't necessarily find out if they were the right decisions until much later, and that can be a very stressful, I guess a very stressful weight to kind of to have on you, and it can be kind of a weight, especially when you're
Yeah,
dealing with people and you care about those people, right?
yeah,
So certainly learning that's something I've learned about this job, and especially coming from being an engineer and now doing this role, there's a lot of things that don't translate over. Like what made me a good engineer isn't necessarily what's gonna make me a good manager, and figuring out ways to adapt. And I have not figured it out yet, and if I'm doing the right things or the wrong things. But
yeah,
it's a learning process. It's been a huge learning curve for sure.
yeah.
And like anything, you just have to keep practicing and
Do you enjoy
keep
it?
um parts of it, yes, parts of it no. I think it is the weight and the stress of kind of having people's lives in your hands in some sense, you know, like as an integrator, when we're staffing jobs, they're not always in the same geographical location. And sometimes, in order to staff those jobs, you have to, you know, move someone geographically. And that, you know, selling the engineer the opportunity, and that's probably the wrong word to use, because, you know, when we are staffing, I think the the number one thing that we do is try to, fit the opportunity with the engineer's interests, based on, you know, what we've gathered from conversations. And so we don't ever put, or we try not to put people in positions that we don't think are a good fit. You know, if someone comes to me and says, like, I hate doing graphics work, I've only done graphics work the last 4 years of my career, and I want to do something different. Well, if we get an opportunity to, convert a bunch of Delta V graphics from, you know, iFix to live, the worst thing I could do would be like, hey, so and so, like, go work on that project, right? And
Yep.
we try not to do that. But sometimes, I don't want to say you're left with no choice. At the end of the day, right, you have to get jobs done. But making those decisions, like, there's not always a clear
Yeah.
right and wrong answer. And
Yeah, there's often oh, go
and it
on,
can
sorry,
be a
keep
big
going.
life, I was going to say, it can be a life shift for someone, and kind of having that in your hands, and
Mhm.
making those help, or kind of being a part of those decisions with, you know, the individual, um, has a lot of gravity and a lot of weight to it.
That's important. That's a really important one actually, because when so I think the way like a company like Skellig used to work is like, okay, well, you have a strong sense of who the engineer was. You'd have a stronger. I used to have a stronger dialogue with engineers than I do now, for sure, right? In a direct sense. It's not unless there's a massive problem. That's usually when I get to, because problems get filtered up through the likes of you now, right? And then I get the biggest problems, and I love working on those, right? I hate to see an engineer struggling, and you sometimes you can't help them, and that's where stress, I get the biggest amount of stress is when you see someone, or like a project manager or an engineer, and they're just like, okay, we could take you out of the situation. That's a nuclear option. We could try to support you in some way to work through the problem. Um, and then that's the one you want to keep an eye on the most, because it's like, oh God, you got to really communicate well with each other. And then sometimes there's such a high volume of topics. But I guess the thing that that I was trying to figure out, we were trying to figure out, like, as we scale the company, like, how do you scale making decisions in a consistent manner so that you're predictable for engineers, you're
Mm,
predictable for customers. Um, and that's kind of some of the ideas around like the Skellig way, because it's all based on that Toyota way, right? So if we have a way of working that's predictable, then the stress hopefully becomes less and less for you, because you're following more of a predictive pattern. If you're an engineering manager that matches the values of the company, and you're making decisions through those values, and then the engineer understands what those are, you know, that's where people will more self-select into the company, and they'll also self-select out of the company. But either way, you're kind of getting hopefully towards like a stronger cohesive unit by doing it that way. And in the process, stress should start coming down. Um, the only reason you're stressed is because you care. So the thing you can never do is like keep someone stressed constantly, because then you have to solve it by stopping to care, and that's not where you want
well,
someone to be. So you know
yeah.
there'll always be some level of stress. You just want managed stress so that it's solvable. Like, because I imagine, and what I've seen is like it's missed expectations, it's misaligned expectations. Um, that's the one that like really gets you.
Well, yeah, the Skellig, I would say the Skellig way, right, is about caring. Like there's a lot of caring when it comes to the Skellig way and treating people with respect and having everyone's like best interests in mind. And that's certainly the hardest way to run a company, and that's probably why you see a lot of companies that approach management without putting people first. It's because it's easier not to put people
It is
first, and it's
way
easier
easier.
just to it's
Yeah,
easier just to tell people what to do and to treat people like numbers. And I take a lot of pride that obviously, and I think we all do that. Skellig doesn't do that. It doesn't run that way. Um,
yeah.
but yeah,
And
it
that's the
is. It
goal, is to
is.
scale it not working that way. So like it should get better over time. Not like we just went through massive amounts of changes, say in the last year, 2 years, right? Where we grew as a company with a lot of engineers, and then we started growing management. Um, and then that's where you kind of really figure out like, okay, how do you actually do this well, and how do you honor the reason that the company would exist in the first place? Like, because if it's not about enabling an engineer to do great work, and you just kind of have quote good management, I don't know if this makes sense or not, Greg, but like, isn't there a thing like where you do have a choice to make? It's either like you're either doing right by the, you can have any kind of way you want to work, right? But at the end of the day, there's going to be a choice where you're either falling on the side of the engineer or you're falling on the side of the company. And then
Mm-hmm.
the hope is that we can scale a way that like is fair to all concerned. But when that decision thing has to be made, that you're falling slightly on the side of the engineer, but you're expecting adult behavior in return. So you can't always fall
Mm-hmm.
on the side of the engineer, because then you end up with, some kind of diva where you can't support that engineer long term. So you want to manage them, you know you want to manage them out. But the engineers that are trying to focus on doing great work, oh my god, like all day long, like if you can fall on their side and make sure they have what they need to execute well, everything else kind of works from there. It's very simple when it works. And a lot of time is just being clear on like, who are you as a person? Do you fit? Who are we collectively?
Right.
And does it all fit? And if you can get good at explaining and understanding who you are, um, and articulating it, then that's where you can attract more people that fit, and fit values wise. You know,
Everyone I've met within Skellig, is a very compassionate and kind person, and we've done a phenomenal job hiring and attracting those kinds of people.
if you're an engineer, why would you care about that? Like, why would that matter? What does it do for
Oh,
you if you're an engineer?
yeah. I mean, when I worked for
You know,
a
because
larger company, um, there was this feeling of just kind of being a number, you know, um, and not being treated like a person. Um, Not necessarily. I don't know. It was more like when there's a face behind a company that kind of knows you by name and can remember the name of your pets, and um just treats you, it humanizes you really. And I think so
mm-hmm.
often that doesn't exist with people's jobs, and it can be, yeah, not to use the word over and over again, but it can be really dehumanizing and not a great place to work. And so I always
Yeah,
valued like someone being like, "Oh, hey, Greg, how's it? How you doing? How are your cats? And I'm like, "Oh, thank you, thanks for remembering." I don't know. It's difficult to put words to,
Yeah.
but
For me, what I thought, like when you're trying to set something up, is like when you have nice people that help each other out, like, and they're asking about stuff like that, you're not then fighting a political battle. So as an engineer, you're able to focus on the work.
mm,
And if there's a problem, you feel like you could share what the problem is. And then that would enable you to be part of a functional team that achieves something, and you can grow and learn in that team because you can be open and honest about where you're strong, where you're weak. Others can do the same. Um, and that's where if you don't get that cultural piece right, it just fizzles out. So one of the things I think about for Skellig is like, okay, we started out small and it's easier to a degree to be more like that. But then as you scale, it can introduce new challenges where you've now got new people. Are they going to, are they going to keep it consistent for the engineers? Or what's that engineer's experience going to be like? Is it going to be richer? Um, because like back in the day, I'll say I don't think I was ever really good at operating. Okay, I was good at like okay, I could understand an engineer and like oh I knew you like to say delta V batch and you were good at bioreactors or
mm-hmm,
whatever. You could think then all right, bioreactor project, Greg, right? Decent at that. But then like how do you structure something so that a team could execute well? um, that's twofold. There's a cultural side, and then there's a military execution command control. I'm never good at the detailed command control side of it, so I need other people to be in the company that can do that part really well while fitting in the cultural element. So hopefully that's not too complicated, but that's kind of the way I think about it. Where um, like I think you're a really good detail oriented person, and I'm not. I'm good at, or well, I'm less good at the details, and I'm maybe okay at the bigger picture. But it's the how do you bring in people that can do what you don't do well, but still
mm.
fit and belong.
But what you're describing, I don't know if that is a function of you and what you're talented in and not talented in, or it's really just a function of how we're set up with a company. Because especially when you're talking about the detailed execution, I'm still not involved in the day to day of our engineers, and nor can I be because I'm not there. I'm not at the site, their client site with them. I have no idea what the culture, the work culture is like. I don't know what is being assigned to them specifically, on a day to day basis. And so, unless someone's asking me for help with some kind of, I don't know, technical problem, or I had more insight to the operations of the project they're working on, the most I can do is just be a supporter for those engineers and advocate for them when it comes to finding a new role. And sometimes I can't even do that because we just might not have the opportunities, to that match with their dream role. So it is very difficult the way we're set up, being like a remote company and the nature of our work, and it's unlike working in a single factory where we're all aligned and all have the common goal to make a certain product. um, we are spread across 30 plus factories, and each person's working on a different factory, and so there's going to be a lot of
Yep.
every and in different cultures, so there's so much variability at the engineer's day to day experience, um, that makes me always feel like I'm being ineffective in helping people out. At least from the standpoint of what you would consider like a traditional manager
Yeah,
that
yeah,
is
yeah,
more
yeah.
close to the engineers, because for the most part, yeah, I'm pretty far removed from their day to day experience, which makes the job challenging.
Right. But definitely for the, if someone's in a staff aug position where like, okay, they're kind of more helping a client figure out something on
Mm-hmm.
that site, right? But when you have a situation where you have like a, say, a capital project where,
Right.
or a project where there's a lead engineer, like that lead engineer then there's more of a cultural responsive, not responsive, more cultural, they're more empowered to create a Skellig environment or a certain type of environment, and they're going to do the best they can to set that up. And then you probably never, unless there's problems within that, you probably don't hear much. Or I guess,
Yeah, no, and I think at least
yeah.
since I started this role, there haven't been many like new capital projects that, less,
Hmm.
certainly less than four new capital projects that Skellig has started that we were executing as like a Skellig team. Um,
Yeah. When an engineer has a problem, you, and the problem's behavioral, it's cultural, there's something not working, they're not happy with their team, someone's being horrible to them, they're getting undermined. Any one of those kinds of problems, Jesus, those are hard to fix because they're on a clock. They're
mhm.
on a clock. And you have to be able to solve those problems. And the challenge for a company like us, or any company actually, is to be able to empower someone like you, give you a way of working so you don't have to feel stressed about going off the reservation and making a decision that's going to come back and bite you in the ass later. So that's why, like, the Skellig way developed out of the Toyota way, a way of laying out a process or a set of values by which decisions would be made. So then the engineer can feel like, oh, I should have expected that decision from Greg. That's good. All right. Or, whoa, what the hell, Greg? That's wildly not what I expected. Flag that, or
Yeah.
on your side, hey, engineer, this is what I expect from you. And, you know, if you're not getting that, like not, adult behavior, not, the values that we're trying to espouse to, then we're not working towards or using those values, then it's not working, and something has to change. But I think we have to get really good, especially as early as possible next year. And I think to me, it's going to look like a lot of disciplined behavior. I think there's going to be a bit, and I don't mean like schoolyard discipline, just clear expectations. Is it this or is it this? Whereas I think this year has been a lot of like, how should we do it? Okay, what's your experience been, Greg, trying this out? Where, oh, you've too many people reporting to you, or,
Hmm.
there's an underserved need here that's not getting addressed. Okay, let's figure out how to systemically address it. How do we get fast at that? I
Yeah.
don't know the right answer, but I think I know how to
Hmm.
process towards that right answer. And I think it's going to look
Hmm.
a lot like improving these understandings of who does what, where, when. That'll help to settle those expectations we have of each other. And then that's going to create hopefully a better environment for saying, I'm over these expectations are unreasonable. Let's
Hmm.
divide this up, and let's do it now, because we can't afford not to. What's slipping through now is like, oh, there's potentially that you might think, oh, there's probably a higher priority than my problem, but you don't know. And you don't know because data is siloed, and we're not moving information clearly. So next year, one of the things Julia and I want to have is, these process maps. I want them out Now I want us working towards solving the two biggest challenges we have right now, which is sales process and invoicing. Those have to have a path forward by the end of the year. Everyone under Tony should have a RACI matrix of what they're responsible for, and they should have the process map to show
Mm,
what what you work on. We'll try to refine then and continuously improve, but each of those efforts to continuously
right.
improve is a project because we have to drive new behaviors. So we sit in a meeting and decide collectively, this is coming off of Greg's plate and it's now this other person's job. Someone has to kind of police that behavior for a little bit until it's ingrained potentially.
Till it's learned and practiced.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Because otherwise, you'll just have to be whistleblowing someone that's not doing their part. Then you'll have to do their part because it's time sensitive, and then we're right back to where we started. Just monologued at you, but
Oh, no, no, no. It's such a difficult problem to solve that, you know, I don't know what the right answer is.
I find it a worthy challenge, or it's kind of like because it is stressful, but um, I like trying to give it a go, and I see it as I have a lot of gratitude for the opportunity I have to try to do this
Yeah.
because I know if I don't have this
It is. It
job,
is fun. I mean, in my
mm,
mind, I kind of compare. We are altering a machine that doesn't stop,
yes,
and that's a big challenge too. Is
yeah,
like
that's a good analogy.
not just identifying what the new process is, but the transition from the current process to the
Yeah,
new process,
yeah,
because you definitely can't efficiently do it all at
right.
once. Um, and I think because we're still operating what you described with like needing to police the new way of working, right? Or the whatever the new process is, it's very difficult. At some point, it does have to be like a light switch. Like, okay, today you're going to do it this way. But, and going back to the discipline that you described, suddenly light switch, you have to do it this way and you're running under a time crunch. It's going to be awfully attractive to jump back and do it the way you know how to do it in order to meet,
Yep,
your deadline, rather than trying to learn the new way. And
yeah.
that's the hardest
Well,
part, I
and
think.
culturally, I
Yeah.
hate the idea of kind of the putting a cop on it, so to speak. But I think you have
Yeah.
to because otherwise, someone in your position, you have to know that if there has to be there has to be infrastructure that catches if you're not coming through with your part of the equation or somebody else isn't coming through with their part of the equation, therefore you have to revert back because oh it's not their fault for XYZ reason whatever, but
Right.
it's still not good enough. The buck's got to stop somewhere. Who's solving the actual problem? And then you revert back. So that's why, that cop is essential to make sure things are escalated. And by cop, I just mean project manager. But I'm,
Right.
there is a theory around like doing things like PMO and stuff like that you can either it's an enabling thing or it's something that you use to
Hmm.
just police everything and oh you're not following the procedure, but I think you have to do a bit of both. So thank you for your time today, Greg.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, and